Everyone, and welcome back for this fifth edition of our new series, Board Talk. My name is Patricia Lenkov, and I am so delighted to be here again this week. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, Board Talk is a weekly conversation about diversity in the boardroom. And diversity in the boardroom, as our guest last week, Michelle Edkins, stated, is not some social mission. It's also not a handout. It's simply good for business. That's been shown time and again, but we're still struggling with change and evolution in this area. So to better understand the problem, the issues, each week we have an expert guest who gives us their insight and expertise based on their own unique perspective and experiences. We're doing this on the Mosh platform, and for those of you who don't know, Mosh is a new digital platform, and as you can see here, it allows brands or individuals, celebrities, or really anyone to build engagement with audiences anywhere and everywhere. And this week, I am so thrilled to be speaking with Tim Smith. Tim is the Director of Environmental, Social, and Governance, ESG, short. Shareholder engagement at Walden Asset Management. And Walden is part of Boston Trust and Investment Management Company. And Walden does manage portfolios for clients seeking to generate social and environmental impact with their investments. Tim leads the ongoing shareholder engagement program to promote greater leadership on ESG issues. He is also co-chair of Walden's ESG Research and Engagement Committee and a member of the Corporate Governance Committee. Prior to joining Walden in 2000, Tim served as Executive Director of the Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility, ICCR. He was there for 24 years. And this organization coordinates corporate responsibility programs for over 275 religious and institutional investors who are using shareholder advocacy to influence corporate conduct and promote social justice. In 2007 and 2012 and 13, Tim was named as one of the top 100 most influential people in business ethics. And in 2010, he received the Bavaria Award for Impact at the third annual Bavaria Awards for building sustainability into the capital markets. The NACD has also named him one of the most influential people in corporate governance in 2012 and 2011. So welcome, Tim. There's more, but I'll give the short version of your many accomplishments. I'm so glad that you're here with us. Welcome.
Thank you.
I wanted to jump in with a very interesting question/comment. I was very interested to learn that in 1992, so 25 years ago, your firm, Walden Asset Management, launched something that's called Just Vote No, which was voting against boards of directors that did not have people of color or women, which was a practice that was later adopted by many others, but did not realize that it was 1992 that your firm actually started this. So can you tell us a little bit about how this came to be?
I'd be glad to. So we're an investment firm, as you indicated, and we work with our clients. We have clients, individuals and institutions, about $8 billion of assets under management altogether. And one of our clients we've been working on issues like diversity and the environment and sweatshop issues for many, many a year. But in 1992, one of our clients, the Sisters of Notre Dame, based here in the Boston area, who had been active on diversity issues, said, we're just fed up voting for boards of directors that have no diversity on them at all. And we choose now to vote against such boards. And we applauded them for that and said, that is such a good idea, we're going to implement it as well. But as you indicated too, this has really taken off now. Not only are there a lot of religious organizations and investment firms that are voting no, but now the state of Massachusetts, for example, where I live, the pension board, which is $68 billion, votes no on boards if they don't have 30% diversity.
Wow.
And likewise, the state of Rhode Island and CalSTRS, the California State Teachers, voting no on some companies that are unresponsive on diversity. So it's both a way to make a statement, but it's also a way to say to a company, you know, we know you value having your boards get elected. This is one of the ways we're holding you accountable on your governance.
So interesting. So 30%, which I think is a number that's, you know, sort of thrown around a lot in these circles. Should be 50% at some point, but we'll settle for a step at a time, right? So there's still, I guess, a lot of firms and, you know, public companies for sure, and private we won't even talk about, that still 25 years later do not have that number, or maybe even close to that number, and some have no women still, right, as we know. So what are your thoughts about why it's taking so long? I mean, it's just, you know, glacial.
It unfortunately is. I know 2 years ago, I'll talk about this in a few minutes, but a coalition of investors and women's organizations that I'm part of wrote, I think it was about 160 companies that had no diversity on their board at all. So we did remind them what century it was, but we also were saying we're investors, we're concerned, we're watching. You probably have as good an idea as I do about why it's so glacially slow. One reason is that there's not a lot of turnover on many boards. So it's not like a lot of seats open up. And that's led to some big investors talking about refreshing boards, so new slots are available. And then, of course, many would say, I think with some, it would be appropriate in some companies to say, you know, the old boys club is in charge and they don't feel the need or hadn't been thinking about this. In addition, of course, we're trying to make sure that there's a strong pipeline of very capable and skilled women that could fit on boards with different skill sets. But it is, what are we at now, 19% for women on boards? And we can, how do you talk about celebrating? Because it went 3 years ago, it was 16%, now it's 19%. One women's organization say it's going to be about 2050 before we even come close to parity. Yeah,
absolutely. Ernst & Young came out with a report, I think it was last week, and they said at this rate of change, it will be, I think, 2050, because it's going up, I think, 1% or something like that. But it's funny because you mentioned what year we're in or what century we're in, and both of us have Canadian ties and Canadian roots. You know, we look at Justin Trudeau, right? Canada's recent new prime minister, and he came out with his cabinet that was, I think it was 50% women, and they asked him why, and he said because it's, I think it was 2016.
Yes, right. He said 2016 is the answer, yeah.
And that actually got so much press because it's like, yeah, well, why wouldn't we have it like that, right? I mean, maybe we can learn something from that. Even though I think Canada, I don't want to digress too much, but doesn't have those kinds of numbers just like the United States also, right? The diversity numbers are sort of the same as, you know, pertains to boardrooms.
On boards, yes.
You also mentioned the pipeline. And, you know, we often hear, right, there are no supply. We want them, but they are, you know, there's no qualified women.
Right. Yeah, and of course, that's rubbish. That's a very convenient argument that, gee, if I can remember 10 or 15 years ago being at a stockholder meeting and asking this question, the CEO said, if only we could find some qualified ladies, we'd put them on the board. That's a quote. It's shocking. But in fact, there's Catalyst and other organizations have very full pipelines of very well-qualified women with special skills too. So if you're looking at somebody with an engineering background or a financial background or a cybersecurity background, they're there. And I know CalSTRS has created a database that companies can get access to, where you can say, okay, you're looking for people, let's have the nominating committee or the search firm spread its search more broadly. As you probably know, at least the past criticism has been that nominating committees and search firms tended to look in traditional places. And often that was CEOs who were mostly male. And I think there's been a lot of pressure now on companies to recognize that expertise and skills aren't always at the CEO level. It's good to have some CEOs on your board, but you could have somebody who heads a department who would be bigger than many companies on the exchange, right?
Exactly.
And they'd be women. The search firms are under some pressure now by investors to look at something we call the Rooney Rule, like in football.
Yeah.
As you're choosing a coach, you have to have your pool of candidates have some diversity. And so whether we're talking to nominating committees who are doing the search themselves or search firms, we're saying, from our point of view, that's expected. And search firms are saying they're hearing more and more from their clients, companies who are hiring them, that they expect that as they come back with reports to the nominating committee.
Well, it's interesting because as a recruiter and having done this work for 20 years, it's easy to go for the low-hanging fruit, and those are proven directors who already have been validated by another board.
Right.
So that's, easy, but it doesn't allow, the supply to broaden and to go out to new ideas. And I would challenge my clients when they ask me, I say, not only can I get you a woman, but I'll overlay ethnic diversity on it also.
Of course.
Because they're out there and they're
That's right.
ready, willing, and able and qualified. And,
That's our commitment too. It's not just gender diversity, it's gender and racial diversity. And many companies, it's good to say, actually have that as a commitment. They state it in their proxy statements or in their nominating committee charters, and they list the kinds of things they're looking for in board members, and they talk about gender and racial diversity as a value that they're looking for, and then some of them make it an actual commitment that they're going to make it a high priority in their search.
Well, and at the end of the day, what is it really, why are they really doing it? I mean, it's the right thing to do, but more importantly, it is good. It leads to good business decisions and better governance, right? I mean, it is sort of the best way to govern any organization is by having diverse thinking at the very top.
Well said. It's a diverse thinking coming from a variety of perspectives, backgrounds, experiences. And certainly we have seen studies, I'm sure some of your earlier commentators talked about this too, studies that talked about boards that had a significant number of women actually helped in their performance. And it's impressive to hear CEOs talk about this, not simply, as you said in the start, as the right thing to do, but as the smart business thing to do. So as investors, our message very much to companies who are not moving very quickly is you're actually leaving opportunities to improve your governance and improve your performance.
Absolutely. I actually, it's funny because I hear, well, we're doing well, so, it's fine. Like, we don't have to make any changes, but it's like, how well could you be doing?
Very good.
Are you sub-optimizing? Do you realize that you might be sub-optimizing, as good as you think you're doing? Maybe you could be doing much better, And
you could be doing well financially, but still have a number of problems in governance in general. And investors are still going to say, we don't find your lack of good governance acceptable, even though we're pleased with your numbers. So increasingly, we're hearing investors and women's organizations saying together that they expect companies to be taking this seriously as a high priority.
Yeah. Well, it's also, I'm working with a client right now, and it's important not only from the investor perspective and the good governance, but they want their employees to be motivated. They want to see themselves represented in the boardroom.
Right.
That's very motivational for people within an organization to say, look, there are people like me at the top. They represent my way of thinking.
There's a long checklist for the business case for board diversity, and you're starting with a key factor. It's also that your clients sometimes want it, and certainly your shareholders are asking for it. Do you remember the story a couple of weeks ago in the Times about Facebook saying to its law firm, we're evaluating whether we want to continue to do business with you. We need our team that works with us to be diverse, but we don't just want the people you send to the meeting to be diverse. We want the backup team to be diverse too. We expect it. So I think that sends a real message to a lot of companies that this is an issue which is sort of not a casual thing that they'll get to when they want to, but that it's expected. So when investors actually sponsor shareholder resolutions with companies to get votes on them expanding their diversity, not to set quotas, but just to have a process and a commitment to work at diversity, they're getting increasingly good votes. And it's partly because, as you talked about BlackRock and State Street, these are firms that understand the business case for this. And my understanding is they vote for this as good governance.
That's right. Absolutely. So I know you're very involved or somewhat involved in the 30% Coalition. And I wanted you to talk a little bit, if you can, and tell us, who they are and what they're doing. And I know they're amazingly impressive and doing some good work. So I would love to hear your experience in that area with them.
Yeah, and they are impressive. I've been involved with them since their inception 5-6 years ago. And this is a group of women's organizations and investors. So if companies are paying attention to what investors are watching, I'll just tell you some of the members of this, and I'm going to the big investors rather than the folks like ourselves, which are important but are smaller in size, but the California State Teachers, City of Philadelphia. But here's one, the Government Pension Investment Fund of Japan.
Wow.
That's the biggest pension fund in the world. It has $1 trillion, and it is joined. The Regents of the University of California, Washington State Investment Board. So these are among the many pension funds and investment firms, as well as treasurers like Deb Goldberg in Massachusetts or Tom DiNapoli, the controller of New York State. So I think companies who get a letter from this coalition that we have been writing for several years get the message, these are some of our biggest investors who are petitioning us here. We best pay attention. So the coalition has actually wrote letters. Now I'm talking about the members who own the stock. Have written letters, talked to companies on the phone, met with them, and on occasion had shareholder resolutions to get brought up at the stockholders meeting. But I've been to a couple of stockholders meetings in the last couple of weeks, and there's been some boards with some decent diversity, and we make sure we commend them and say publicly, by the way, investors care about this, stick to this as a commitment. And then, of course, there are women's organizations and investors that highlight companies that have no diversity and don't seem to get it yet. And the pressure grows on those companies.
I think what you said is so interesting. We sometimes forget we need to commend those that are doing the right thing, recognize, and, maybe use them as examples for those that are not.
And one of the things the 30% Coalition is doing is gathering examples of companies, not only who do it well, but might have a model for other companies to look at, like a very good charter for the nominating committee that expresses their commitment to diversity, or language in the proxy statement. So we're all about trying to empower companies who want to move in this direction by showing them good models, at the same time leaning a little on the companies who seem to be stuck in one place.
I read that the coalition group the investors represent over 1.2 trillion in assets under management. I don't know how recent that number is, but
that's a couple of years ago when we wrote the letter, yes. And now we have the Japan Pension Board as part of it too. So it's well over $2 trillion of assets under management. So not an insignificant chunk of the investment universe, partnered with very prominent women's organizations too, who are a very thoughtful and strong voice on this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a question I want to insert here that came in from somebody listening, watching. And the question is, what do you think about tenure limits on boards? You talked about the lack of refreshment and turnover. So what about these kinds of limits to move people appropriately or in some way out and refresh?
It's quite a debate among investors about that, whether there should be a firm number of years, after 9 years you rotate off. There's also debate about whether after 10 years you really are an insider and you're no longer an independent board member.
Yes.
So long. So I know a lot of organizations have been saying we certainly need board refreshment. We need boards to evaluate themselves and decide how they're going to bring new blood in. And some would be supporting the having tenure, if you will, or I know some other companies like TJX up here in Massachusetts instead of just setting individual limits, you can only serve for X number of years, they track the overall tenure of their board, so that they may have somebody that's been there for 20 years, but they may have a number of new members, and the average time sitting on the board is 6 years, for example. And one of the women who heads the nominating committee, who's been there a very long time, brings tremendous history and a wealth of knowledge to the board. And in a strange way, she's got more historical memory than some of the top management team who are relatively new. So I'm just making a comment here that from our point of view, it's not a open and shut deal that you should have tenure and you should have to leave after 10 years.
Well, and I think that naturally...
I should add, there are some boards that are setting retirement levels, saying you can't just be on the board forever. If you're 70, you should retire. After all, the CEO of Exxon had to retire when he was 65. That was the rule. And likewise on boards, I think we should have some guidelines there.
It's funny because it reminds me of what I had Holly Gregory on a couple of weeks ago, and she said we should all be like George Washington, 2 terms and we're done. He started that, and that she said we should be George Washingtons in the boardroom, But it actually brings what you said naturally segues into a question that came in, which is about board evaluations, because that is one very effective way. At the end of the day, it's like you should be on the board if you're effective and contributing. So the way to get at that is through evaluations. So any thoughts on that? It's sort of
exceedingly important. So we've been part of the Principles for Responsible Investing, which is a global coalition of investors. It's huge. It's got $60 trillion of assets under management from pension funds and investment managers around the world. And part of the thing what we did was engage companies to talk about their governance. And this issue came up a great deal. And we learned a great deal about how some companies are quite committed to do that they have annual reviews of how their board members are performing. They look for ways to improve. And they're also willing to say, somebody maybe came 6 years ago or 10 years ago and knows a lot, but we need somebody with a different kind of skills now, maybe cyber security skills, and we'd like to rotate somebody off. It is very difficult on a board. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, to ask somebody to step down. But if you have a regular system like this, and people know what the expectations are, and that might happen, and it's not a personal statement. It's not like you're failing or you're a poor board member, although there are some, but it's that we have some new needs, and we want the whole board to help set the expectations for those needs, and we want to be able to say to somebody, okay, please maybe rotate off next year.
I think it's a big cultural shift and mindset shift that needs to take place, because, not so long ago, boards were not only a lifetime appointment, but they were beyond reproach, right? You got into the boardroom, you sat around the table, and it was kind of the untouchables, right?
No longer that at all. Look at Wells Fargo, of course, which is an extreme case, but some of their board members only got 53% of the vote. That was a very strong statement from investors. And yesterday, ConocoPhillips, a good company on many fronts, including not bad on board diversity, had a vote on its pay, and it lost. It got 68% no or abstentions. Now that sends a huge message to the compensation committee. They've got to do some major work with investors to regain confidence and make some changes too. So I think you're right that the days that we can sit back and say, well, boards are just there to, it's the old boys club and they're very close to the CEO. That is increasingly changing. Board members are valued for their ability to be asking thoughtful and hard questions sometimes, and not just be part of a team that says yes to management's plans.
Yeah, I mean, the job has definitely, changed, but I think, for the better, obviously. And, I think directors are on the other side of it trying to be more selective because of the responsibility that being a director finally has. You know, it's not just a really good lunch six times a year in some really nice, you know, place, right? I mean, to
Well
be
said.
quite candid.
And by the way, the amount of work board members are doing, especially on the committees they serve on, it's really substantial. It's not a light duty at all. So some of them get paid very well, but they also, if they serve on 2 committees and meet 10 times a year or something like that, it's heavy lifting.
And I see it from my point of view, though, everyone still wants to sit on board. So, you know, it's good. I mean, I think we're, you know, definitely moved in the right direction in terms of responsibility as the director. And, you know, people are willing to step up and try and do their best to do the right thing.
Well, that's certainly true. I think there's probably some people that would look twice at a board offer or look at the company that's offering it to make sure that it's a fit for them. I've met a number of women who both had sat on numerous boards and were offered or recruited for board seats. And it was just very clear there wasn't a fit there. The CEO was of the old school and very paternalistic, and this one woman said it wasn't worth it. It's not just the prestige of sitting on the board. I wanted to know that I fitted in and I could make a contribution.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's smart. I mean, you know, it is a lot of time and energy, and there's some risk always. So, we have time for just, I think, one more question. I'm trying to pick the best one for you. So what about, you know, the fact that we have improved female representation on boards, but, you know, we sort of had this big jump and now it's leveling off to some degree. You know, as we talked about, it's going up maybe 1% every year. Do you think at all, and this might be completely crazy, that there is sort of somewhat of a loss of interest or other new priorities, you know, in the boardroom, for example, cybersecurity with that cyber attack last week? I think everybody's scrambling now, worried about this. They should have always been worried about it, but worried more than ever. So any thoughts? Does diversity take a back seat because other things take over?
It's a very good question. I thought about it as we were preparing. I think there's some other priorities that jumped front and center, and you mentioned one. Cybersecurity is so important for the survival of some companies, right? Or look at the impact Target had when they were hacked. But I don't think it's taking a back seat. I'm actually watching more and more companies who are both saying we don't have to convince them they get it. They understand the business case. They understand the reputational issue. I had one general counsel of a mid-sized company say, I get your message and I'm embarrassed we have no women on the board now. Look what year we're in. So I don't think it's slipping backwards. I think there's some other impediments to changing the numbers quickly. But it's a slog, isn't it? For example, the 30% coalition, after having written all these companies and talked to so many of them, there's about 120 companies that we talked to put women on the board. Well, we should celebrate that, but it's not always because we knocked on their door or filed a resolution or had a discussion with them. It might be a whole variety of reasons, including peer group pressure or pressures from the board. So if you have champions on the board saying, I'm not satisfied with one, that helps. I can remember being at the EMC stockholders meeting before they were merged with Dell, and one woman had just retired, and another woman, a very prominent woman in the consulting world, was newly on the board and chair of the nominating committee. And I congratulated them for their history and where they were going. But she got up and said, you know, it has not been lost on me that I'm the only woman on this board right now. And basically that shall not stand. And sure enough, they moved quite quickly. But having a champion or some people who are unapologetic on the board saying, this is one of my priorities, and I'm going to hold the rest of you accountable if we can't move forward on that, if we have good chances to expand our board.
Well, and I think, you know, I could talk about this with you all day, but I'll just say that, you know, it's been shown that also women in sort of chairing committees or chairing the board makes a big difference. So where the women are actually on the board, whether they're not just a director, but a director or a chair, for example, of nominating and governance, also makes a difference, right?
Very much so. And as you would quickly say, the number of women on a board too. So we hear lots of stories from women who are on boards that the dynamics are very different if you're the sole female on the board. And Peggy Ferran, who's a guru in governance and she's the corporate secretary of Prudential, she sits on the Occidental board, and they have 3 women on the board now. And I'm sure she and others could testify to the difference that makes to have that kind of breadth of diversity on the board.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I could talk about this all day with you, but our time is up. So it's been so wonderful, and I am so grateful to you for being here with us and sharing your vast experience and insights, and very, very appreciative.
Well, thanks for the invitation. It's very important, the work we're all doing here, isn't it?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and we'll sign off now. Thank you.
Thank you.